a few minutes just for photos so that the photographers can take the pertinent photos.
Les pedimos también, por favor,
I please ask you as well, the journalists and colleagues, to, when you are going to ask a question, please say your name and from what, obviously, what company or media group you're working with.
¿Sí lo tenéis? ¡Qué ricasco!
Es que ricasco, muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you very much.
Vamos tomando asiento.
Please, could everyone sit down?
Gracias.
Thank you.
A mi derecha,
On my right,
Marius Sánchez,
Marius Sánchez, co-director of the documentary, and JORDI EVOLE, co-director of the documentary as well.
Si les parece bien,
If you
comenzaré
deem it,
haciendo
I'll
la
ask
pregunta,
the first
pues
question
ya
and then I'll open up the
al resto de
floor
compañeros
to
y
the rest
compañeras.
of our colleagues.
Jordi, Marius,
JORDI and Marius
contextualizar y poner de alguna
contextualize
manera en
and to
espacio
put in
este
time and
proyecto, cómo
space
se
this
idea,
project.
en qué
When was
fase
the idea? When did it enter into
¿Cuándo
the
se hacen
production
las
stage?
entrevistas?
And when are the interviews held?
Buenas tardes.
Hi, good afternoon.
Este es un proyecto que
This is a
empezó a
project which
fraguarse
started
un año antes
or commenced a
del
year
10º
before
aniversario del final de la
the
violencia aquí en Euskadi. Eso
10th
es en
anniversary of the end of
2020
violence in the Basque Country,
aproximadamente.
2020.
Es entonces cuando empezamos a
That's
investigar,
when we started to do research
con la intención de
with the
hacer un
idea
documental
of
en el
making
que
a
pueda
documentary
retratar
and where we
qué
can
sucedió en
portray
esas
what happened
negociaciones,
in those negotiations at that time.
En ese proceso tan
And in
largo,
that long
acabamos
process,
grabando la
we end up
entrevista
recording the
en
interview
mayo de
in May
2022.
2022.
La entrevista de
The Francisco's interview was recorded a year later, May 2023, and it's now being premiered here. So therefore it's been a project which was a slow sort of like,
compañeros, compañeras.
it was done slowly. Simply I would like to add, or it was cooked slowly. In a festival in which this year we present films of people who we admire so much, like Trueba and Bayona. Who else premieres here in San Sebastian? Well, they're very good people. Trueba, Cochet, for example. Well, with all of those premieres and all of those great directors, we would have liked to have made less noise with this film, and I can guarantee that it was not our intention to come along here to this press conference with with such expectation. We didn't think at any time that the thing was going to grow, snowball so big in less than a week, and we're here to answer whatever questions you want to ask.
Sí.
Yes, over here.
Le acercan el micro.
And why do you believe things have snowballed so much? What, the noise? Yes, well, I think that the issue is a trifle difficult, no matter, it always has been, no matter how you can be, it's quite thorny, and you might prick your finger at the end of the day. And those people who gave obviously they set the agenda when with the remarks on the film. We would have preferred to have said things after seeing the film, but people have spoken beforehand. Such has not been the case. We have nothing to reproach them for, but we would have liked at least for people to have seen or viewed the film beforehand. Another question over there. Remember to say your name and who media group you belong to, if you'd be so kind. Hi, Juan Sardá. I'm from El Cultural. I'm over here, Jordi. I would like to ask a couple of questions. The first is, you're talking about the reaction. I think it was quite foreseeable. I think it's quite naive for you to think that this was not going to happen. So therefore, I'd like to know, when you make the film, how did you address this moment in which this controversy was going to come along? And my second question is, what's your personal opinion upon Josu Ternera? Well, we are relatively used to some interviews, for example, that are a bit more controversial than others, can generate noise, and we are used to concepts like laundering or things of the nature which we don't feel comfortable with, because it's quite clear in our mind what our job is and how we should do it. But what we didn't expect in any way was the letter. That is to say, we never thought an initiative that took place such as it did. We weren't prepared for so much for the noise that we've heard. But we've been very relaxed, nevertheless, throughout the process. And each of the steps that we've taken over the last 3 years have been quite meditated, and we've discussed it. We've questioned ourselves internally. So therefore, we were quite satisfied. We continue to be so with the documentary and with the result. And so therefore, we have felt very relaxed. Yes. Do you answer the other question? Your personal opinion. I can't have a personal opinion for a person who I don't know, apart from the time that I spent with him during the interview. So therefore, I think that above all, Josu Ternera is a militant. It puts the organization above anything else, and vis-a-vis the contents of the interview, we were let down from the point of view that we would have wanted a more reconciliating language. We would have liked for there to be more pleasant and kinder words. But Josu Urruticoechea talked more inward more than outwards, and he talked more for the prisoners who are still in jail, the ETA prisoners who are still in jail, and he talked for the militants, and that annuls the possibility for there to be a more reconciliating discourse. And I didn't want to make a full amendment, shall we say. That is to say, in this sense, as regards this issue, there's been a cowardness when saying everything one thinks to not end up being a dissident at the end of the day. If I'm not mistaken, yes, over here. Hi, Ari Fernandez from the Noticias group. Could you explain how did you set up the interview with Josu Urruticoechea? It was organized by doing a lot of work. That is to say, at the end of the day, we got together with him before the interview on certain occasions, not too many, and always through people people who know him. And we've gone from an initial negative, an initial no, and he said yes at the end, process, which lasted quite a long thing. Between one thing and another, it lasted for 1.5 years. It was complicated, but at the end of the day, he was prepared to do it. At the back there, please. Hi, Marc Garriga from Catalonia Radio. Okay, to what extent do you think or believe that Josu Ternera is sincere with the answers he provides in the documentary? Calibrate the sincerity of invited guests is very complicated, because they are telling you some stories that you don't know anything. You can't check on the fly whether they're true or not. And I insist upon the idea that I think that he talked more inwardly than outwardly, and this can, to a certain extent, can reduce or set boundaries on his discourse. Yes, we can re-ask him when we know that what he's saying, objectively speaking, is contrary to what the situation is reality. Sincerity or insincerity of an interviewee is sometimes quite difficult to detect. Yes, please, in the front, yes.
Hola,
Beatriz Martínez para JORDI and Marius. I'd like to ask you the conditions that Josu Ternera asked for the interview, whether there are any red lines or what were the conditions for the interview? None.
ninguna condición.
no
Si hubiese
conditions.
condiciones,
If there had been conditions, we wouldn't have done the interview.
Es más, nosotros,
And even more so, I would
todas
add
las,
that
veces que
when every time that we
intercambiamos
exchanged notifications with them or we got in touch with them, we were quite clear on how the interview was going to be, what was our position, and how separate ideologically were from the outset of the first day. And he was aware of that from the outset, as I was saying, from day one. Yes, in the back, please. Keep your hand up, please. Hi, good afternoon. José Canón para Cine con Ñ. Okay, two questions. One was, at what time did you decide to interview Francisco Ruiz Sánchez? And that opens and closes is at the beginning, at the end of the documentary. Why did you decide that? And what you said, do you believe that he's talking inwardly because he's got another way to talk to the militants in that way? Why did you think he decides to do it through you? I think that Francisco, first of all, we discovered that he existed at the time of the interview. Josu Urrutikoetxea explains and confesses that he participated in the attack of the mayor from Galdacano, and the people in the script and the directors of the program at that moment start to research and discovers the existence of Francisco. When we finished the interview, it seemed, first of all, that it's fair that Francisco should know that he confessed the participation in the attack that he suffered, and that a person who's lived in first person, shall we say, an attack of this nature caused by Josu Urrutikoetxea had to form part of that program, or that documentary, excuse me. A colleague has just raised your hand, yes? Please, if you keep your hand up, it's much easier for my colleague to give you the microphone. Thank you. Hi, I'd like to ask you, when you talk about being let down due to the result in the interview, do you believe at any time he could have given you other answers and he might deny his past? I'm not too sure to what extent he can deny his past, but for example, the film, there's a moment in which he talks about what he lived through with Yoyes, who was a colleague of his, he had a friendship, and he visited in Mexico. When he started to talk about this description, I thought, well, when we come to the time that what he thinks that the terror killed Yoyes in her town and holding onto the hand of her son, I think I'm sure that we were thinking he might assume that responsibility or feel a certain or repent what he'd done or felt sorry for what he'd done. But that was not the case. The death of Yoyes in this case was a decision of the organization, that they had a problem with the people who wanted to reinsert themselves, people who had been in ETA and wanted to come to reinsert themselves in society, and to give an image that wasn't so easy. Well, they murdered Yoyes. I thought there was going to be another type of answer, sincerely. Obviously, after that answer, the following answer about other ETA attacks, that's where I started to see quite clearly that there wasn't going to be too much movement vis-a-vis the positions that we've seen on other occasions. It's true that he condemns Miguel Ángel Blanco's murder or death. It's one of the headlines of the film, and I'm sure we would have liked that. Obviously, condemning this attack could have been extended to the rest of the history of ETA. Beatriz Martinez, I think. Please, could you give her the microphone? I would like to ask you both, at what time what sincerity, this issue of sincerity, to what extent did it condition you? That is, you were thinking whether he was sincere or not in the answers he provided. To what extent do you believe, or you were aware, better said, of, how to say that, of that sort of like suspended reality that could take place in the interview? And how do you analyze this? Because there are a lot of tunnels that he goes through which are quite controversial, And there's another issue which is said quite a lot in the press, and that is it seems short. It seems the truth is he's justifying himself, he's protecting himself. I'm not too sure to what extent I'd like to know. You could talk about this if you could, which is an issue that has been mentioned a lot in the press. That is to say, the documentary seems, when what he's doing quite clearly is protecting himself. I'm not too sure. They're your conclusions, I think. Yes, they're your conclusions, and I respect them perfectly. I've not read it anywhere, whether it's short, and that's your opinion, and I respect it perfectly. But look, to what extent, how extensive range of opinions we can find, from laundering for it and for it to think it's a short document. It's a documentary which has a lot of opinions, I imagine. What I would like to state from the journalistic interest of an interview of a leader of a terrorist organization is indisputable. That is to say, there is no university, journalism university, that this doesn't have any journalistic interest to it. So therefore, I think we're living in a moment in which, not too long ago, ETA stopped killing, and in fact, only 12 years ago, that they announced the truce, the end of violence, and we can see in surveys now there are a lot of kids who are 20, 25, 30 years of age who don't know who Miguel Ángel Blanco was. This is an anomaly for this country. This country has to know how to look into the past courageously and without any fear. It's painful, of course. The history of every country is painful. Ours is as well. But we've got to decide whether, if we want to be with that side of society, I'm not the majority or not, I'm not too sure. But for example, it said to Bote Chapote, who didn't know Chapote was the guy who killed Miguel Ángel Blanco. In that position, I know quite clearly what my position is vis-a-vis that issue. Mono Mayer from the Austria agency, what was your intention to fight against this amnesia that the young kids have nowadays? What was your position before? What were your intentions before the interview? Because the interview turned out the way it turned out. How did it turn out? Well, the way we've seen it. Okay. Well, I thought you were going to give me your evaluation. Well, our intention was quite simply to shed some light where there had never been light before. It's the first time that an ETA leader gives an interview to a TV. Not only a state, but in this case, ended up being worldwide, which is the case of Netflix. We held the interview without knowing that it was going to be put on Netflix. We did the interview on our own accord from our production company, Producciones del Barrio. I wanted to do it with any conditioning factors. When you have a partner, quite often it may condition you, and that's quite logical, but I wanted to deliver the product just the way we had finished it to the operator, whoever wanted to, well, obviously, to show it. Netflix were immediately interested in the contents, and so therefore we wanted to have the point of view that we'd never seen before. On the 10th anniversary of the end of violence, several series, some were fiction and some were documentaries on ETA. In none of these was there a point of view of ETA's point of view was shown. So therefore, for me, it's very important to know that point of view, no matter how painful it could be. And as of there, the film was completed with the testimony of Francisco Ruiz. And in that sense, I think that it's quite clear the place that we, us the authors, have taken our perspective. I would also add that behind this, there was an historical will that say when, in a few years' time, whoever wants to know how ETA reasoned, or a leader of ETA reasoned, there's a place in where you can see how they justified each of the attacks or each of the decisions that were made. And you can place history in the place it deserves.
Aquella señora primero que ha pedido a la mano.
Yes, the person who has asked for the floor there. Hi, I'm not too sure that I've understood. You filled in a gap that a journalist has not done vis-a-vis the leaders of the terrorist group, or have you said that? No time I've said that. No, we've come here to fill in a gap. No, not at all. The only thing we've said as regards to the contents, it's the first time that a TV channel, initially at a state level and now globally, has a leader of ETA prepared to answer the questions of some journalists. We haven't come here to fill in the gap of anyone. Okay. And then, and I'd like to know whether you understand that it's open up to different interpretations, seeing what's being published, and what are your own adjectives, so to say, for Josu Ternera? To leave to one side other people's, what are your opinions? Well, I think the adjective that we're using the most is these days is militant. The truth is, he's a person for which the organization, ETA organization, is above everything else. And his arguments and his reasoning stem from there, always. And then feelings, we're talking about the feelings that we have, we feel vis-a-vis him. He was quite let down by the fact that there wasn't a positioning which was more reconciliating by Josu Urruticoechea. Yes, in the second row, please. Hi. You've started the press conference talking about the noise the documentary has generated and how this might hinder other films of other directors. Did you occur that so much noise could have hindered you as well? No. No, I don't think so. No. Up until now, we've had more situations in which we've been subjected to this noise for going over moments of our career, like when we did the false documentary on the 23rd of February, when we interviewed Arnald Otegui, when we interviewed the ex-ETA Iñaki Ricarte, another ex-ETA militant, and more banal things, like, for example, when we interviewed Miguel Bosé. So therefore, we've lived through situations which were already complicated. We don't see this as more complicated than any other. We'll come back. There are another 4 people that have raised their hands. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Alio Rosolo from Cineap. Again, I think congratulations. Congratulations to the festival for programming and scheduling this film, and congratulations to Netflix to dare to show this film, and congratulations to both of you. I think that you've opened the door to the future. For the time being, it's quite clear, and I seem to understand here, the society is not prepared for this, but I think that you're opening the door. So, to be able to talk about a point of view, as you say, that hadn't been provided before. Thank you. For me, and being very critical with Josu Ternera, we don't understand the step he had taken vis-a-vis his own people, but I think it's a great step forward. I didn't expect that from him. And my question is, what's the most difficult for you when you address this work? What was the most difficult thing, or what's been the most difficult thing when you've addressed carrying out this project or this work? It was a very complicated interview from the -3, that is to say, from the moment we started to forge ahead with the project, we thought that the situation was complicated. Our colleague said before, why didn't you expect the noise? Well, yes, obviously we expect the noise, not so much noise, sincerely. We didn't expect a request of a preventive censorship being used, but when we are addressing doing the interview, there was only one solution for what you're saying. For that difficult moment in the interview, didn't collapse things. They prepared very well beforehand. And it's an interview which is done with means that in journalism doesn't unfortunately have. We've taken 2 years to interview Josu Urruticoechea, 1 year in doing the editing work for the interview. So therefore, for us, that's a luxury. We know the time, how long it takes in the profession, and we know there are a lot of people who can't do this. We can do this. And only through the work and also the commitment with this, my profession, is how we understand that we went, a project like this went ahead. Thank you very much for your kind words before, because the truth is, the easiest thing for us was to stay at home. The easiest thing was to not do the interview and stay at home. But we don't want, for whatever might people say, we stop doing things that we believe we have to do. And for us, doing this interview for us is a journalistic duty, and that's why we did it. And if you believe that through this type of opinions or any, like my colleague says, how long is this going to hinder you? I'm not too sure whether it's going to hinder us at the end of the day, but sincerely, I'm absolutely proud to have made it. Absolutely proud. And I wouldn't like that on a certain day, for example, I look back and I said, well, geez, you didn't do that because you were afraid to do so. First front row, please. Hi. Yannick Carres from Film Bulletin from Switzerland. Going back to the beginning, you said you took a long time until the interview was carried out. How did you get in contact and how did you convince him to do the interview? Did you have any strategy or any idea, or how to talk to him and how to... Well, it was an approximation, shall we say, before we talked about sincerity. I can tell you what our sincerity was, and I can guarantee that from the first meeting, which wasn't directly with Urrutikoetxea, from the first meeting, we already told his surrounding. We weren't here to pay tribute. We were here to give an overview of the trajectory of ETA, and so therefore of Josu Urrutikoetxea within ETA. He is a character that enters into ETA with 17 years of age, and in 2018, he reads the last the communique of the disbandment of the terrorist organization. So therefore, it's a unique testimony, I believe. What we can't do is offer or argument anything else other than providing our honesty and the loudspeaker that we have to be able to show it. If someone wants to use the tool of communication, and this is something that he has said quite recently, we have a good platform to do so, and we do it from honesty, rigor, with very in-depth work. So therefore, that's the only argument that we can employ, and that's what we do. And I would add that I understand people in his surrounding colleagues or his to understand how we work, helped, I think, for him to take that step and do the interview. In the back, hi, good afternoon. Urrutikoetxea, in the statements to Berria, the newspaper says it's not what expected, they did what they believed, and it lacks contextualization. Thank God he didn't like it, because if he'd have liked it, I don't know what others would have said. But the truth is, the opinion that Josu Urrutikoetxea may have, I'm going to respect it vis-a-vis the documentary, because he said it, and having seen it, it's been an answer which quite obviously he says, it's not what I expected. I don't even have to even answer him, that's his opinion, and I think it's quite good that he can express his point of view. In the back there, please. Marga Catalunya Radio. You've talked about other interviews that you've carried out upon the Arnaldo Otegi on the same subject matter, and you're a bit let down with the very few courageous step, quote unquote, of Josu Ternera of condemning certain actions of the terrorist group. Do you have the intention of continuing to go further in depth into this subject matter? And Chapote is a name that you've mentioned, could be one of your objectives, perhaps. The truth is now, you've caught us at a moment in which, what can I say? I don't know. Do you want to do Chapote in an interview? Oh, we'll talk about that later.
Es buena, la pregunta, Marc.
It's a good question, Mark, but the truth is,
Vamos a pasar esta experiencia
let's get over this experience
de la mejor manera
in the
posible.
best way
Para nosotros
possible.
está siendo
For us,
muy gratificante
it's
que,
quite
pues,
gratifying, and
un
I
día
would
como
even
hoy,
say a
un
day
día como
such as
hoy, de
today,
contacto con la prensa,
with contact now
de
with you, the
intercambio de
journalists, of
opiniones,
exchanging points of
de-
view and
de,
opinions.
bueno, pues
The truth is,
ponernos,
well,
algún tipo de pregunta que
to
no
ask
siempre es
questions
fácil
that
la-
it's not
la
always
respuesta.
easy, that are
Vamos a
not
esperar
always
también
easy to
al
answer.
15
Let's
de
wait for
diciembre,
the
cuando se
15th of
estrene
December when it's
en
premiered
Netflix,
in
y luego,
on
desde
Netflix,
luego,
and then
lo que tenga que venir, vendrá.
whatever comes along
Será
will come
meditado,
along. It'll be
pensado,
meditated. We'll
comprometido,
think about it deeply.
y sobre
It'll be
todo,
committed as well. And above
a mí me
all,
gustaría,
I would like to
siempre
always
tratar a los
try
espectadores,
to
a la ciudadanía, como
treat
creo que se
citizens
merecen.
and the audience
Yo
in
creo
the
que
way they
tenemos una
deserve.
ciudadanía
I think we have
formada,
citizens
informada,
which are formed and
que es capaz
informed
de sacar sus
and
propias conclusiones,
that are prepared.
no
They can
necesita
draw their own
que alguien le
conclusions.
diga
They're
lo que
prepared.
tiene
They
o lo que
don't need
tiene
to
que ver.
what they have to see and what they
Sobre
don't
todo
have to see.
si
Nobody to
obviamente
tell them that,
ni esas personas lo han visto.
even if those people have not seen it
Entonces,
beforehand. So
pues,
therefore, I
la
don't
verdad
know.
que,
The truth is,
creemos que
we believe that
le ofrecemos a
we offer
nuestra audiencia
our audience
un material que puede ser
material that can be maybe complex, but we confide completely and trust the audience so that they, with their own opinion, they can take it in. But we don't want to tell people what they've got to see and what they don't have to see.
Detrás, antes está esa profesional.
In the back, yes, the professional back there.
Soy Ángela de La
Angela
Sexta.
from La
Me
Sexta.
gustaría saber qué le
I'd like to know,
responderíais a
what
todas
would you
esas
answer
personas que os están
those people who are accusing you of laundering more or less your su tarea? What would be your answer? Well, they're mistaken when using the word laundering, because interviewing is not laundering,
porque
because
preguntar no es blanquear,
asking is not laundering.
y creemos
And we
que
believe that
nos conocen muy poco.
they know us very little if they've drawn the conclusion that we've laundered Yoshua Ruticochea. They don't know us at all. If someone places us in
De la
the
izquierda Berchale,
in the
o nos coloca
environment
en un lugar
of the
una
Abertzale
cierta
left, for
simpatía,
example, or a
o
certain
nos pueden haber
sympathy,
dado la entrevista
or
porque
the interview was
somos,
given to us because
bueno, pues, periodistas
we
afines.
are journalists who are in tune with what they believe, but they don't know us at all, and such is not the case. And so therefore,
Yo creo que
I think
el
that
verbo blanquear se
the
utiliza
word launder is
demasiado.
being used too much, and I don't know, I don't understand the meaning that it may have in a case such as this. And I would add that I hope people see it, because we are convinced if they see it, they're not going to consider that we are laundering anyone at all.
Últimas dos preguntas.
Last
por
two
favor,
questions,
ya
please.
tenemos gente esperando de antes.
People are waiting from before, yes? Juan Salado, once again, of Cultural Español. I would like to say I understand your arguments, but I'm surprised that you say that he's a militant, a person who's a murderer. A militant is Padre Sánchez, for example. I don't know. But it surprises me, the word that you use. I think it's quite obvious that in this case there's a political problem, but there's also a problem, a criminal problem. So therefore, at what time did you address it? I don't want to be, well, alarmist, but when you, the son or the wife or the friend of a person that's been murdered by ETA, horribly, for example, can see this documentary and what they may think, seeing the murderer, the person who has destroyed their lives. We're talking about a militant, we're talking about a political character. He's a criminal character. I don't know what your opinion is about this. Well,
Si igual no se ha entendido bien.
perhaps you've not understood. Are you
Militante, no sé si
militant? Could you clear that up? I think that when we use the word, or in my case I use the word militant, what I'm referring to is his reasoning that isn't marked at all by what he believes himself, but because of strict guidelines set by ETA. And these are the guidelines that structure, shall we say, the way he thinks and the way he reasons and argues things. I think that when we sit down to talk to him, this is one of the characteristics of this conversation. He doesn't leave the guidelines of being a militant of ETA. I think a militant, which is perhaps understood, I would complete by saying he's a fanatical militant. I'm not too sure whether that adapts much better to what you think. That's to say, I don't want to use other type of terminology. Many other words occur to me, but the truth is, I don't think we should enter into that type of, well, giving him those names, that is to say, denominating him this way. It's not up to us to provide those words for you. I think that considering Josu Urrutikoetxea as a fanatic within the organization, like the ETA terrorist organization, I think perhaps adjusts itself much more to what you, that it doesn't bother you like the word militant. I wouldn't like you to just to leave that taste in our mouth. He's only called him a militant. That wasn't the intention. And in fact, undoubtedly that any other militant who feels offended because you say, oh, I'm a militant, like you said, well, militant, Pedro Sánchez. But a lot of people, militant, you would have to read what is said, nevertheless. But I believe that that wasn't the intention of Marius, of only call him a militant. I would like you to not leave that in your mind, because at the end of the day, it's important for us to think that we're looking like millimeter, like we're measuring the dots, the full stops, the inverted commas, the commas, everything we say. I understand, and that's the dangerous. But I understand that what Mario said when he said militant. I wanted to clear this up, and I hope that this is of use to you. And vis-a-vis the victims, the pain is impossible to avoid. The pain, when you go over the history of a country, it's impossible to avoid. If you want to go over it with the reality that people have lived through, there are victims with many opinions. There may be a victim who directly will tell you, I don't want to see it, or on the contrary, a victim who will tell you, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So victims are not a homogeneous collective. It's not a single mass and an abstract mass. These are specific individuals, because yesterday I was in Vitoria with Sara Huesa. They killed her, in the year 2000, they killed her father. The reconciliating discourse that Sara Huesa has, I feel admired with it, because she's working upon compassion and going in depth into the issue of compassion. She's a person that has seen part of the documentary, said, I'll end up seeing it, and at no time does she feel offended because we've made the film, nor has she felt that any pain, or that nobody should see that film. Another victim, I can talk about many other victims. Francisco Ruiz himself, who was shot by the commando in which Josu Urrutikoetxea was also in, and who opens and closes our documentary. Immediately, the moment we told him that we had that material and that interview with Josu Urrutikoetxea, and he gave information upon his attack, the first thing he asked me is, I want to see that. He wanted to see the interview. If Francisco Ruiz would have said, listen, guy, listen, mate, this material, I don't even want to see the material, I would have understood it perfectly. But I would like to not homogenize or sort of make all the victims the same. That's it's not a specific category. Victims of terrorism, victims of ETA. No, there are specific people, individuals, and I can guarantee that there have been many who have come, talk to us on an individually and also in a collective or a group to tell us what you've done is very good. Okay, one final question. Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to know how long the interview, well, the uncut interview, and the question that somebody else asked that wasn't answered is, well, why do you consider that Josu Urrutikoetxea said yes to the interview? The interview was done in 3 morning sessions, 3 hours each, so therefore approximately there's, 9 hours of uncut interview. I can't really tell you why he said yes. to the interviewer, but it is true that
que él en la entrevista
in the
se
interview
le ve
you can see
punto obsesionado
he's
por
a
la
bit
imagen
obsessed
que
by
se
the
ha dado a
image
través de los medios de
that
comunicación. Y dice,
that
la
the
frase
media
que
has
otros han
given
hablado
of
de
him.
mí, ahora
Others have
yo.
talked about me, and now I'm going to talk about me. So
No puedo darte
I
otra
can't
razón
really
que
give
no
you
sea
any
esa.
other reason
Se le
apart from
preguntó
that.
abiertamente
We
si
asked him
era
quite openly
para
whether
preparar el juicio que
to prepare
iba a esperar en
the
España.
trial
Incluso
that
Rodrigo
is
Chestnut
still pending.
en
He's
Francia,
he's
le
pending
quedan
extradition
unas
in
causas en
in
Francia,
France. He's got a
luego
couple
serán
of
sus juicios,
trials still in
será,
France, and then he will come,
seguramente será
quite surely he'll be
extraditado
extradited
a España.
to Spain.
Le preguntamos
We asked him
directamente
quite
cómo había
directly
sido
whether
para
he had
prepararse
been
el terreno
to
para ese
prepare
juicio.
the field for that trial.
Y nos dijo
He
de una
said
manera muy
quite
clara que
quite
no,
clearly,
no había
no,
sido por
no,
eso.
it wasn't because
Ni
of that.
acabó en el montaje final
It didn't even
esa
end
pregunta.
up, that question didn't end up in the final edit. So therefore I can't give you any further reasons than what he gave us,
y el que él mismo da en
that
Beria,
he gives
sí,
in
la-
Beria in the interview that he gave yesterday, that he says that communication is a tool that he's never used and he wants to start to use it, and he does it through an interview.
Damos por finalizada
Okay,
esta
this
rueda
is
de
the
prensa.
end of
Muchas
the
gracias.
press conference. Maitenas, you ask us, you know a lot about this. What can I say? No, not a lot. Well, we can talk about that later on in the QA. You want me to say something? Thank you very much for the rigor and the respect that has been shown to our journalist colleagues. It's very important we can have these places to continue to advance. And of course, thank you very much to both of you, Mario Sánchez and JORDI EVOLE. Thank you very much.